Buscamos asilo político en países como este.
Those who seek political asylum in countries like this, like the United States,
Nos encontramos con la cerrazón de autoridades migratorias.
we encounter the decisions of immigration authorities
Que regatean las leyes internacionales.
that barter away the international laws.
So that's Emilio Gutierrez receiving the Aubuchon National Press Freedom Award on behalf of Mexican journalists at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. So for more, I want to bring into the conversation from Washington, Bill McCarren, executive director of the National Press Club, which invited Emilio Gutierrez to accept that award. McCarren went to El Paso earlier last week to visit Gutierrez in detention. He also delivered to authorities boxes full of petitions that call for Gutierrez to be released. Bill McCarren, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you explain when you went to El Paso, your visit with both Emilio and Oscar, and then with ICE officials?
Sure. Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me. So we were able to go to El Paso and through the work of Eddie Beckett, get into detention to see Emilio and Oscar. There were brief meetings. I was accompanied by Congressman Beto O'Rourke from the El Paso area and two of his staff. It was an emotional meeting with Emilio in particular. He was agitated. He broke down a couple of times. He complained of health problems, which you all have discussed earlier. And we think, by the way, the diet may contribute to high blood pressure. He said his arm was numb, this sort of thing. He wasn't sleeping well. And I'm not a doctor, but he seemed to be having PTS and those kind of symptoms. He was depressed. The authorities did not let us see Emilio and Oscar at the same time. Emilio had to exit the room, and then Oscar entered. Oscar seems healthy. He's very concerned about his father, of course, but in every way he presents almost like any early college-age kid you'd meet. Just a great kid, and it was an honor to see them, but it was upsetting to see them under those circumstances. And then we followed for a meeting with ICE officials, as you indicated.
You talk about how that meeting went, and did ICE officials tell you that you should be toning it down, and explain what they meant? Sure.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, we were there to, among other things, present petitions, and we had, at that point, 18,000 signatures. I believe it's close to 23,000 now. And we were able to submit those into Emilio's case file. So that was very important action for us. And we did not know we would be able to meet with ICE. So during the meeting, there were 5 ICE officials, and myself, the congressman, and his staff, and Eduardo, Emilio's attorney. And during the meeting, we were discussing the judge's case, his ruling, and the judge found that Emilio didn't present credible evidence, in his view, about his journalistic activities, and did not suggest that he would be, did not give adequate reason that he would be in danger if he returned to Mexico, both of which we object. So we were discussing this, and we were told by one of the ICE officials that we should tone it down. And I think by that he meant, take a calmer approach to this. Don't question things as much. He said, let the process work. Well, my answer to him immediately was we were not there to tone it down. We were there to raise the issue of Emilio's case and make sure everyone knew his name, if possible, and make sure everybody knew the circumstances, that this was a journalist seeking asylum and it was not being granted asylum. And we know that the ICE officials knew that we would have a news conference at 1 o'clock that day. So this was a bit of a shot across the bow. Now, later they chose in the press to deny that they had said we should tone it down, or suggested that wasn't what they meant. But we were pretty clear what they meant.
Why is this case so important to you, Bill, as executive director of the National Press Club? And also, why is Emilio Gutierrez and his son Oscar still being held in jail?
Well, that last question, honestly, my answer is I do not know. As Eduardo mentioned, they are, they have no criminal record. They're not a threat to the community. The facility is very crowded. We believe as many as 30 people were released to humanitarian parole the week prior. So there are a lot of people that may need to be in that facility. We don't think Emilio and Oscar are two of them, and we're asking that they be released. Why we gave Emilio the Aubuchon Award and why we were interested in putting a spotlight on problems in Mexico related to journalism in general, I would call your viewers' attention to a recent report by the United Nations that came out December 4th, in which David Kay, who's a very credible person, and some of his staff went through Mexico for a week, interviewed 250 journalists about the kinds of problems that are going on there. And just a few quick facts. We believe there have been 12 journalists this year killed in Mexico. None of those 12 cases have been solved. And some of those journalists who have been killed are in a protection program that's operated by the Mexican government. And it's that very program cited by the judge that he says will protect Emilio Gutierrez if he's returned to Mexico. We're not buying that. We don't think it's an effective program. We're very concerned about violence against journalists everywhere, but in Mexico. And so Emilio is a great case for us to highlight. It's an unfortunate case, but it's one we want to bring full attention to. And we're the National Press Club is the world's leading professional organization for journalists. So this is what we do. And we do it in Iran and Azerbaijan and other places, but I never thought we'd be having to fight a case like this here in the United States.
Eduardo Beckett, can you explain why at this point, with the case going to the Bureau of Immigration Appeals, Emilio is still being held? He has not committed a crime, nor has his son.
Yes, and Amy, I think that we're seeing the criminalization of asylum seekers, where the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, is taking the position that if you come and enter illegally, like Emilio and his son did, through one of our land port of entries and seek asylum, that you should be treated like a criminal. There is no good reason to hold him. He meets all the criteria to be released. I think that going back to the question that you asked about the media, I believe that, with all due respect, that Immigration Customs Enforcement is a bipolar organization. On the one hand, to my face, they'd say, we don't care about the media. We don't care if you go to the media. On the other hand, privately, they say, tone it down. And so this is a bipolar organization that wants to treat legitimate asylum persons like Emilio like criminals. And Congress has given them so much power. It's kind of like if the police charges you with a crime, but you never get to see the judge, and only the police gets to decide when and how they're going to release you. Same thing with ICE. Since he entered legally, the law that Congress gave this power to ICE, basically they decide if they wanted to release him. They can release him on his own recognizance, on an order of supervision. They can set a bond, a low bond. They can put an alternative to detention programs. So they have a whole host of tools that they can use, but they're choosing not to. And so we're shocked that Congress gave them so much unfettered discretion. And I think that's a bigger issue that I think Congress needs to fix this, because then it's abuse of authority.
So they could release him today?
Exactly. They could release him right now if they want to.
Oh, the BIA stands for the Board of Immigration Appeals. Bill McCarren, also the fact that Emilio Gutierrez is a journalist who was reporting on narco-trafficking, its relationship with the Mexican government, with President Trump's professed concern about the drug war and narco-traffickers, you would think that journalists like Emilio are critical.
You would think so. There's plenty of need for good journalism in Mexico, but so Emilio's voice and his outspoken approach to problems in Mexico, whether he's here or in Mexico, is valuable, and you know, I think should be encouraged. We do think it's a dangerous place for him now, and we think you know, he should not be returned, and we would think that the United States policy should be all about trying to protect him. I wanted to point out, Amy, that the Washington Post in a December 12th editorial called for asylum for Emilio. So when the judge is questioning whether or not Emilio is a journalist, well, we're giving him an award. The Washington Post is calling for asylum for him. I really don't think it's a question about whether or not he's a journalist and whether his voice is a valuable one.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us. Of course, we'll continue to follow this case. And if you want to see, watch, listen to, read our full interview with Emilio Gutierrez Soto in jail in El Paso, the interview that Juan Gonzalez and I did, you can go to democracynow.org. Bill McCarren, thanks for being with us, Executive Director of the National Press Club, and Eduardo Beckett, Emilio's attorney. Thanks so much for being with us.